Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Bernstein. I am Marlboro's Alumni Engagement Manager, and I am so excited to welcome you to our third Aiming High event. Tonight's event features three formidable women, and I am so grateful to each of them for taking the time to join all of us this evening. Cara Adams from the class of 2010 will be moderating the conversation this evening. And I know that she has a number of questions prepared for our esteemed alumni. But if time allows, towards the end, we will be taking questions from all of you. So please feel free to put those in the Q&A box, which if you hover over your screen, you will see an icon that quite literally says Q&A. And if you just type your question in there, Cara and I will be monitoring that, like I said, towards the end of the program. I will also be monitoring the chat and Q&A for help with any technical or logistical questions. But as I mentioned, I am very thankful to have Cara here as our moderator. Cara is someone I have known and admired since our time together as students at Marlboro, and I am very glad to introduce her to all of you this evening. Again, she is a graduate of the Marlboro class of 2010 and received her undergraduate degree from New York University before attending USC Law School. She is currently an in-house attorney at Warner Brothers Entertainment, where she drafts and negotiates various music deals in connection with the studio's film productions and soundtrack albums. Immediately prior to that role, Cara was an associate attorney at Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, a law firm in downtown Los Angeles. And in her copious amounts of free time, Cara also serves as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion co-chair of the Marlboro Young Alumni Council. Cara, thank you so much for being here, and I will let you take it from here.
Oops, I was muted. Perfect. Thank you so much for that intro, Megan, and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Again, I'm Cara Adams, class of 2010, and as a fairly new lawyer, I am very excited and honored to be moderating this panel tonight. I am going to jump right in and read you the bios of both of our speakers, starting with Justice Dorothy C. Kim. So Justice Dorothy C. Kim is an Associate Justice on the California Court of Appeals, Second Appellate District. Prior to that, she served as a judge on the Los Angeles Superior Court, a federal prosecutor at the United States Attorney's Office, a lawyer at the law firm of Irela Manella, and a law clerk for the Honorable Norman H. Stahl Court of Appeal First Circuit. Dorothy grew up in Los Angeles and is a proud alumna of Marlboro, class of 1990. She earned her law degree from Columbia University School of Law and her undergraduate degree from Cornell University. Judge Kimberly Baker Guillemet, Marlboro class of 1996, was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Judge Guillemet has served the community for the entirety of her adult life. Immediately after graduating from Stanford University in 2000, she served as a teacher with the Los Angeles Unified School District. And after graduating from law school, she served as a public interest attorney where she represented youth with disabilities and youth in the juvenile justice and foster care systems. From there, she went on to serve as a deputy attorney general for the California Department of Justice, where she practiced consumer protection and criminal law under former Attorney General Jerry Brown and later former Attorney General Kamala Harris. In 2015, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti appointed her to launch the city's first ever Office of Reentry. As the director of that office, she developed policies and implemented multi-million-dollar programs that created employment, housing, legal advocacy, and family reunification opportunities for thousands of Angelenos who were formerly incarcerated. Many of her initiatives live on today. In 2018, Judge Guillemet was appointed to the Los Angeles Superior Court by Governor Jerry Brown. She currently presides over a criminal trial courtroom, co-chairs the Outreach Committee for the Los Angeles Superior Court Mentorship Program, and serves on the court's Community Outreach Committee, Ethics Committee, and Diversity Committee. She also serves as a teen court judge for Los Angeles High School and as a lecturer and subject matter expert at various speaking engagements. Judge Guillemet resides in Los Angeles with her husband, Adrian, and their 4 daughters, one of whom is now a Marlboro student herself. So with those incredible bios, I want to dive into the questions that I've prepared for both of you. So I will start with the basics. Can you just explain for everyone your current job and what exactly your day-to-day responsibilities are? You know, particularly for those of us, or for those of us who may not be kind of familiar with the legal industry and the various paths that one can take within it.
Justice Kim, I'll defer to you to start.
Thanks very much. That'll mean, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to see you all virtually and to see the chats, including many from my former classmates. So thank you. So we can go in reverse order then, because my day-to-day is I sit on the Court of Appeal. So after someone has their trial, for instance, before Judge Guillemet, and they are an aggrieved party, they would file an appeal with the Court of Appeal. I sit on the state court. And so my day-to-day, I think you're probably looking at it. I sit for oral argument 2 days a month, and every other day I am sitting in my office, in my chambers, reviewing the record, reviewing briefs, preparing for oral argument, and then drafting a final opinion and discussing with my colleagues, because each case has a panel of 3 judges. The vast majority of our opinions are unanimous, but sometimes we have dissents. And so I am discussing with my colleagues how we're going to decide a particular matter.
And as Justice Kim indicated, my job entails the first step in the criminal process, particularly the criminal legal process. And in that I'm a trial court judge. And so I do preside over a criminal trial court. I generally hear misdemeanors, but I also do preliminary hearings for felonies. And so my day-to-day, while it's limited in scope, it can vary depending on what's going on with the particular defendants that are before me that day. So generally speaking, I'm often in trial because of COVID. I will say that has slowed down a bit, but we get trials where generally we have to impanel jurors. We have to preside over what are called 402 motions, which are motions in limine that the counsel file with regard to an issue that they want decided before the trial, particularly something that they don't want the jury to hear about is usually, or do want the jury to hear about is usually what we're dealing with at that time. I also handle post-conviction matters, which is essentially once a person is sentenced, whether they're found guilty by a jury or they plead out, they might be on probation. So I'm dealing with, have they completed their probation terms? Have they violated probation because they've picked up a new case? I also deal with diversion. And one thing that is wonderful about our state in particular is that we have a lot of diversion options. Essentially what diversion is where the people agree with the defense counsel and the court that a particular defendant needs an opportunity to get back on track. And so diversion cases are where a person might plead, but at the end of the diversionary period, if they do everything they're supposed to do, their case gets dismissed. And it really gives people a second chance, which often they need. And so that's generally what my day looks like.
Thank you. And so to get to where you are now, what has your path really looked like? I imagine it might not have been linear. You can go to law school with a wide array of different backgrounds. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that? What encouraged you to attend law school? When did you decide to transition from practicing law to serving as a judge? Maybe just walk us through that for each of you.
I'll start this. I'll take this one first. We'll alternate, Justice Kim, okay? All right. Well, I probably had one of the more unconventional routes to becoming a judge. And I was not a career prosecutor. I was not, I never was at a big firm. And so I'm very much about following my own path, and I've been blessed that it has landed me where I'm very happy professionally. And so I will say that I certainly had my share of people telling me or asking me, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? That is not the way to get what you want. So I've been grateful though that I'm very supported, and in first, just my family has always believed in me. And then Marlboro has been a tremendous source of self-confidence building as a young woman. So I've been willing to, I guess, take risks, so to speak. So essentially, to answer your question, after undergrad, I taught for 2 years in South Los Angeles near my home where I grew up. And after that, I went to law school. I knew that I was going to pursue public interest law when I was in law school. And so after law school, I secured a fellowship, and I had that fellowship for 2 years. I represented underserved youth with disabilities, whether they were behavioral, mental health, developmental, and essentially tried to reroute them out of the juvenile justice system. And that was wonderful work. But as those of us who've worked in public interest know, funding is always an issue. So I did have the opportunity from that fellowship to join the Attorney General's office. And there I did do licensing, consumer protection type work, and then some criminal appellate work. And that was a tremendous opportunity because while I was there, then Attorney General, Kamala Harris decided to launch her recidivism reduction and reentry office, which was a new office. And as those of us who are familiar with the legal system might know, it is not common for a prosecutor's office to start a recidivism reduction program. And so as an attorney general, that was quite groundbreaking. And so I was very fortunate to be able to be a part of that, to help her launch what she called her Back on Track program in Los Angeles County Jail, to help individuals get rerouted while they were incarcerated. And from there, Mayor Garcetti was able to reach out, and we were able to launch his first ever Office of Reentry, and that was such rewarding work. And so I wasn't in the courtroom immediately prior to my appointment. I was doing policy work, and I'm very grateful that I was able to achieve this opportunity to be appointed by moving in a path that was a bit different. But it was something that was in my heart. And I think that would be a takeaway with regard to the way I did it. Just do what's in your heart.
So I actually spoke to Judge Guillemet a couple weeks ago before to discuss, our various paths. And so I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I had almost a very, very traditional linear path. I wanted to be a lawyer for as long as I can remember. I didn't know any lawyers in my family, and or in our group of friends, until I think I got to Marlboro and people's parents were lawyers. So everything I knew about being a lawyer was from TV. And I watched a ton of TV growing up. So I thought lawyers were all trial lawyers, and that is definitely what I wanted to do. So I studied American history in college, and I had a romanticized version of, or vision of, what federal prosecutors did. And they respected people's civil rights and enforced them. And this is what I wanted to do. Of course, federal prosecutors also put people in prison. So that is, a dichotomy that might seem awkward to some. So after law school, I clerked for a judge in the federal circuit court, doing basically what I'm doing now on the federal side, which is appeals. And I loved it. It was, as I said, my first job out of law school, and there was something so appealing about every day having your job be figure out what the right answer is, because there is a right answer. There are, of course, on the margins, really difficult questions, but you have a record, you have relevant case law, and your job is just figure it out and get it right, and think of all the right things to get it right, be it policy or precedent or statutory interpretation. So I love that job. After that job, I went to a big law firm here in Los Angeles, where I worked for 2 years. And those of you who are joining us in law firms and big law firms know that it can be very challenging, but also extremely rewarding, because as a young lawyer, I think they expect you to just be perfect. Like, you have to come up with a memo that has to be absolutely right, but it'll eventually be distilled possibly into a footnote. but you better get everything right in the memo so that it'll eventually be right, in a bigger body. I did that for a couple years. Then I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office where I was a trial lawyer. So it was like a dream come true. I was like, here I am in the courtroom doing exactly what I thought I wanted to be doing. And I did that for nearly 13 years. And then I applied to the Superior Court. And I thought I would stay there because I love trials. I love the day-to-day of the excitement of seeing people, figure out trying to convince jurors what the right outcome should be, advocacy at a really high level. I really like the Superior Court trial world. But then we have, the Court of Appeal has something called pro tems, and in my particular division, they were down 2 justices. And so I sat pro tem and really enjoyed my work here and eventually applied for an appointment to this court as well. So that I think is a pretty traditional path to being a Court of Appeal justice. And I know I lack imagination, but that's how I wound up here.
Not at all. Not at all.
No. And so you both mentioned Marlborough as having some form of impact on your paths. So I'm interested in kind of what you both were involved with while at Marlborough. And, looking back on any classes or do anything that kind of informed your decision to go down this path.
Okay,
This is Kim.
so it's my turn. So I'm so sorry. I think I missed the beginning of what you said.
Uh-oh, I might have poor Wi-Fi. Sorry about that.
You want what at Marlborough got us to our path?
Yeah, basically, if you did any activities or classes, anything that informed your decision.
So I was at Marlborough from 7th through 12th grade, and I am so grateful to that experience. As far as what types of activities I was involved in, I ran cross country and I was on student council. I was the secretary treasurer. I do nothing with money today, but as far as what influenced me on this path, I had really, really wonderful teachers, including my AP US history teacher, Dr. Pearson. As I said, I majored in history when I got to college, and I felt so ready for that because I had been in a class where I felt like I was challenged just as much as I ever had been in college. And it was a very, very nice experience. Some other great teachers that I can still remember is Dr. Wenneker for AP Art History. And I loved all my English classes. My 8th grade English teacher was Mrs. Burns. And I will say, when I was appointed to this spot, I hadn't heard from her in 35 years, and she had sent me a card in congratulations. So I am forever grateful to the wonderful teachers I had at Marlborough.
And I will shout out to USAP history along with Justice Kim, because I think any alumni, any Marlborough alumni can attest, going to college after Marlborough, it's piece of cake because they work you. So I feel like Marlborough prepared us so very well for that experience, for the collegiate experience. But with regard to the activities and classes, US AP History, AP US History, AP English definitely prepared me very, very well. I did major in history as well in college and also in English. I also will say that with regard to activities, I ran track. I also was a writer for the Ultraviolet and yearbook editor. And my two favorite parts of being at Marlborough were, number one, speech and debate. I loved speech and debate. I was on speech and debate. I think 9th grade is when they let us join. I was chomping at the bit to join before, but once they let us join, I was all about speech and debate. Really enjoyed it. Had a tremendous experience. Really loved to learn advocacy. We had phenomenal coaches, and I really I think a love of advocacy was instilled with me through the speech and debate program. And then also I was senior class president. And I think that experience actually prepared me very well for my current job, because our class, and I think any woman who has attended Marlboro can attest to this, we are a unit as a class, but we are very different. You know, you have classmates who are your closest friends, and then you have classmates who you maybe don't speak to as much. But there is a mutual respect that we all have for one another being in our class. And so I think that at that time, with my particular set of classmates, we understood that we weren't all the same. We understood that we might see the world differently, but I felt honored that the majority of them had selected me to be their president, and honored that they trusted me to represent their voice. And even though we weren't necessarily best of friends or didn't see everything eye to eye, I think that that is one, it's a testament to Marlboro and the type of, the caliber of young woman that it admits, but also that it really prepared me to deal with situations that require you to hear from people who don't necessarily think the same way that you do. And as a judge, every day you're being confronted with positions that you don't necessarily agree with. You have to hear them out, and you have to be able to come to the right answer. So I think that those two particular experiences really prepared me well.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a good segue to my next question. Do either of you have tips or strategies for doing just that, for working with people on a regular basis who do have views very different from you? I know that Marlboro prepared you for this, but yeah, do you have any tips and strategies that you can share with the group on that point?
Sure, I'll start. One thing that I think is particularly helpful in terms of managing challenging interactions and relationships is to always remember that at our core, we are humans and we want the same thing. And I think that some of the most potentially contentious interactions I've had with people, and I've had some pretty contentious interactions between my previous job working for the mayor, where I was very much on the front lines and dealing with the public, and my current job, where I'm in a position to take someone's liberty away, where people get angry and they get mad and they are infuriated, and they take it out and direct it toward the person that's in front of them. So one thing that I think is key is to understand, number one, why is this person really angry? And what does this person really want? And so one thing that's been very helpful for me is to remember in interacting with people that we are all human. We all want the same thing. We want to be loved. We want to feel safe. We want our families provided for, and we want to be heard. And I think particularly in the context of my job, that is my highest calling, to hear, to listen, and to help people know that while you may not get what you're asking me for today, I have heard you, and your voice matters, your experience matters. And even if what you have done has landed you in a position that is not desirable, I still respect you as a human being, and I'm going to treat you as such. And so I have found that when people feel heard and they feel respected, they are really a lot more willing to acquiesce to what's going to come forth with regard to the ruling. And also it helps them de-escalate. And so that is advice I would give in dealing with litigants. It's advice I would give in dealing with difficult colleagues. Certainly as women, we deal with people who don't necessarily expect or want us in certain spaces, particularly when we have power, and just understanding what is at the core of what this person is saying. And we are all human. So let's let this person be heard and then correct them if they're wrong.
The one thing about being a lawyer and a lawyer in either litigation or in the criminal world is that you always have an opponent. So someone is always on the other side of you. And for most of my career, I was a litigator or a prosecutor, and there was always opposing counsel or defense counsel on the other side. One thing that I learned in both my jobs in private practice as well as at the U.S. Attorney's Office is unlike scientists or software developers or doctors, like we as lawyers have no, like I have no talent. I'm not going to make anything. All I have is my reputation. And as a lawyer, especially, there's a saying that criminal law is much more civil than civil law. And that is because when I practiced criminal law in the federal court system, it is a very small group of people. And there are repeat actors. And so you come across the same group of people all the time. And especially in that smaller setting, which I understand is how probably the practice of litigation is in other areas outside Los Angeles, all you have is your reputation. And there is no case, there is no dispute, there is no one who is so annoying that you should be willing to give up your reputation, because that's really all you have at the end of the day. And I feel like that was a good training grounds to remember how important the big game is, how important the long game is. And there's just, like I say, there's no case and no dispute important enough for you to be mean, to question someone's motives. You can disagree, but not be disagreeable. And I feel very fortunate to have had most of my legal training in that really small group.
Thank you both. I appreciated those answers. Just given, some of the stereotypes that surround lawyers, that we're not civil and that we can't see eye to eye with anyone if they disagree with us. So I appreciated that insight. So transitioning to my next question. So obviously you both are incredibly accomplished. You have these unique trajectories. You're both women of color serving in roles traditionally held by men. And I imagine it has not been easy. So I am interested in hearing, what obstacles you've encountered along the way, if any, and kind of how have you overcome some of those?
I think I'm up to go first. So very early on as a lawyer, I remember this, it was my very first court appearance. And for those of you who are lawyers out there, you know that you can't appear in court unless you're a lawyer. So you give your business card. You can't file pleadings unless you are a lawyer. So I had been discussing with opposing counsel a court appearance I had, and it was my very first court appearance. I got to go by myself. And we did our nothing court appearance, which I think was like a stipulation, and we moved the court date. As I say, it was nothing, which is why they let a young associate go to court. And at the end of it, the lawyer who like I said, we had done the stipulation together, we've been talking on the phone, and he just turned to me, and I don't know what happened, but he said, so are you a paralegal? How long have you been a paralegal? And I thought, well, how could you ask me that? We just came out of court and I just filed the pleading. And it occurred to me, and he was, by the way, really respectful, not a jerky guy. And that was a nice experience because I actually was very confident. Look, it's my nature to think I did something wrong. And so I had done nothing wrong. I had done a nothing stipulation. I'd worn a traditional suit. I looked as conservative and lawyerly as you could. I had done nothing wrong. And I knew this was him and not me, which I think is a real luxury as a young woman when you're in the professional world, when you're actually confident you haven't blown it. And I thought, oh, he doesn't think I look like what he thought I would look like. And fast forward, I've been mistaken for the court reporter, an interpreter. I've been, even as a judge, I'll do an arraignment and a couple of the self-represented litigants will be like, okay, so when I go to my next court appearance, am I going to see a judge? And I was like, oh my God. And I will tell you, it is, you asked about obstacles, but in some ways it's a real luxury. That's a really low bar if everyone thinks that you're not actually in the position you're in. Like you can't help but exceed their expectations because there you are. And so that was just something I think, get used to. And I responded by just saying factually, yes, I am the lawyer. And I'm here for the court appearance, and understanding, like I say, I don't think people generally have bad motives. They just aren't used to seeing someone. I hope this has changed, but in the time, they weren't used to seeing someone who looked like me in the particular role I was in. I will say, the reason I call it a luxury is because now here I am, and I have my job, and I remember early on in the Superior Court and just listening to really good arguments about whether or not the hearsay exception applied, and I went back and forth, and then I was like, oh my God, it's me. Like, I'm going to make the call. I should not be listening this carefully. I should also be, or while listening, I should be making the call. And so there's some luxury to having that low expectation. It's sad, but eventually you get to where you are, and you just have to do the best job you can.
It's unfortunate, but 100% accurate with regard to what Justice Kim just said. I too have been mistaken for, when I was a lawyer, the secretary. I had someone in my office ask me, oh, was I going to get a manicure? And I said, well, no, because, manicures don't last too long for me. And I didn't say why, but the reason why is because I have children at home and I have to wash dishes. That's why they actually don't last for me, but I didn't say that. And he said, oh yeah, you're a legal secretary, so you're typing all the time. And I said, no, I'm down the hall from you. And so from that to now, where I'm mistaken for the judicial assistant, or the clerk, my clerk, there's been a few times when other clerks will come in and I might be in my courtroom, not in my robe, talking to my clerk about some filing or whatever. And other clerks will come in and just start interrupting me, chatting away with my clerk. And just, this one in particular, he looked over at me at a certain point and he's like, oh yeah, what's up? And I looked at him. I said, oh, hi, how are you? And my poor clerk turned so red. He didn't know what to do. He was trying to tell the man, this is the judge. And so he said, oh, where do you work? And I said, oh, this is my courtroom. He said, oh, okay, what do you do? I said, oh, I'm the judge. He said, and he got so embarrassed. And so I agree with Justice Kim. I do think most people don't mean to insult. They don't necessarily have insidious intent, but I do think there's still a lot of bias in this world. And I think there is unfortunately quite a large amount of implicit bias. And I think that can be a scary place to be, because if people recognize their bias, they can at least try to control for it and do some internal self-regulation on the bias. But if they don't realize they have the bias, then they think that they don't have an issue they need to address. And there was one time I remember in particular where I was actually speechless. I was I finished calling a case, was walking off the bench, and this male attorney said, oh yeah, one more thing. And I looked at him and he said, yeah, that woman, this was during the Justice Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. He said, yeah, that woman, she thinks Kavanaugh raped her, but she's confused. And so I turned my head really slowly and looked at him, because nothing we had spoken about the entire hearing had anything remotely to do with that at all. So I looked at him and he kept going. He's like, yeah, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I know about these things. I know about DNA. I've had all kinds of rape victims that think, someone raped them, but they're confused. It was somebody else. It'll come out later. And all I could do was turn my head back around and walk off the bench, because I couldn't believe he had said that to me. And so I think, if just for me and my experience, stuff happens. And people sometimes feel empowered to say things to you that maybe they wouldn't say to a male judge. And I would say, as women of color, maybe they wouldn't say to a person who wasn't of color, because of whatever is going on in their particular life. But one thing that I find has helped me to stay the course and aim high, which we are trying to do as Violets, is to remember I'm not defined by their expectations. And if I let other people's expectations of me control what I did in my life, I would be nowhere. And so I just decide that that's their problem. That is not mine. And if they don't believe that I'm qualified to be where I am, they don't have to. In the words of Bruno Mars, don't believe me, just watch. You will see. So I don't worry about it. And I think the best way to help people understand is just to show them and to continue to be excellent. And it's actually, there have been circumstances where folks come back around and they acknowledge what they thought and how they were wrong. And so just continue to aim high, continue to excel and break through every stereotype and limited view of the world that people have of you.
Very well put. Thank you. I guess this is a similar question. I mean, what advice do you have for anyone, particularly women and women of color, wanting to pursue this kind of work?
Oh, it's my turn. I would say that be very mindful about protecting your heart. And what I mean by that is we go out into the world and we are confronted with a lot of stuff. And sometimes we're on the receiving end of things that are really people's issues, but we can't really know that at the time. And so I think when we go out into the world, when we do our jobs, we do what we need to do with excellence, bring our A game every time, be as prepared or over prepared as you need to be. But when it comes to trust and when it comes to having people in your life who will support you, be very mindful about that circle. And you need to be able to go into the world and show up in excellence and show up in a way that people understand that you are a force to be reckoned with. But you also need to be able to go home and cry sometimes. You know, you need to be able to go home and say, this hurt me today. And I think that that's part of our humanity. And if we didn't give ourselves those spaces to do that, we would be doing ourselves a disservice. And I think when we put ourselves in position to not feel our emotions when we need to, we are less effective at our jobs, because part of what makes, I think, a good jurist and really a good human is empathy. But if you're shutting it down all the time because you feel like you can't be yourself in this world, which unfortunately I think sometimes for women professionally is the case, you are letting a part of yourself die. So I just say, go into the world, be who you need to be to get the job done. But you need to have some people that love you, that are close, and who you can talk to, and who will hear you and not judge you, and always, always, always have your back. So very important. So that would be my advice. Protect your heart and keep people around who will love and support you always.
So if anyone was looking for advice for the bench or otherwise, my advice would be just, you should go for it. I feel like, and maybe it's just me and my particular generation, but you never want to be accused of having sharp elbows, right? Like, oh, she's so ambitious. What is she thinking? And I definitely had those feelings. I had wanted to be a judge for a long time. I'd seen people apply. As I say, you get appointed by the governor, but it's not like someone whispers in the governor's ear and says, oh, there's this person, Dorothy Kim, you should really look at her. You fill out an application. You fill out an application and you submit it. And then in the state court system, after you submit it, if you are lucky enough, you go through a number of vetting processes. And it culminates in something called a JENI, which is the Judicial Nomination Evaluation Committee of the State Bar. And what they do is they send a letter, an email to every single person you have worked with, every single person you have opposed, and a bunch of random people who they think you might know, who are able to opine anonymously on your qualifications. And for whatever reason, I was so terrified, not necessarily of the feedback I get, but I was so terrified of getting outed as having ambition. And I'm frankly super embarrassed about that now. Like, it's okay to be ambitious, right? It's okay to want to do things and apply for the position. So it took me a while to get my application done. And I just dreaded that JENI email going, because you keep things close to your vest. And then overnight, every single person you know knows your deepest, darkest ambition. And so it's this horrible, it was just this fear I had of being outed for wanting things. And the happy story to it is I have never gotten so many supportive phone calls and emails from people I hadn't spoken to in years. And I was so pleased that people want the best for you. A lot of people want the best for you. And it's not even necessarily just your closest group of friends, but people you've met along the way. And after it was all said and done, I wondered to myself, like, what was all the fuss? Why was I so worried about being outed for wanting a job? And so I guess that's why I would say, if you want something, you shouldn't be afraid of, I don't know, the embarrassment factor for saying it and going for it.
Thank you. And so I think something that we've all taken away from the conversation thus far is that your jobs are certainly demanding. They can be intense at times, very challenging. How do you ensure that you do have a healthy work-life balance, particularly these days when work and home are happening in the same place? And we'll start with you, Dorothy.
Oh no, because I have such a bad answer, which if anyone has a good answer to balance, give it to me. I have never felt balanced in my entire professional career as balancing my personal and professional life. So what I didn't say in my introduction is I have two kids. I have an 8th grader and a 6th grader. And there have been periods of my professional and parent life where I felt I was not a horrible parent. And there have been places and times where I felt like I wasn't a horrible lawyer or judge, but never have I been like, I totally rocked that today. I got it. I feel like it's feast or famine, and I'm always trying to navigate it. I will say because my kids are a little older, they're self-sufficient, they're doing very well with remote learning. And as awful and sad as the pandemic has been, I spend in my regular life when we're not staying home, I have a lot of moot court obligations, bar events, meetings for various boards I sit on that keep me really busy. And that is all died down. I do Zoom meetings only. There's no commute. I've done a couple of remote moot courts, but even those have been shorter because I don't have to drive anywhere. And so, except for this most recent period of my life where I have no other or very few extracurricular activities, I am still striving for the best balance I can, and usually failing.
I doubt you're failing. But I understand. I think that is probably one of the hardest parts of being a professional and a mother, because your heart is always split in two. And I say, really being a professional and being a person with people you care about, in family. I am currently in court, so I do physically have to go into court. And my children are remote learning like the rest of the world right now. And my older two are pretty self-sufficient. My younger two, particularly my 6-year-old, does need a little bit more of a touch with support in terms of guiding her. So it has been challenging. We're very blessed to have support in our family. My mother-in-law, we have a babysitter, and then my best friend lately have been very helpful with being here with the girls while my husband and I are at work. And then my sister, my mother are also very helpful. So we have a village wrapped around us. But honestly, much like Justice Kim, you never feel like you have it all under control. And I think what I've learned is important is to give myself grace. I am a human. I am not a robot, and I'm not going to treat myself like one. And I think one blessing in this pandemic, I think, is that it's forced us to slow down. There would be Saturdays where we had 2 soccer games, 2 tennis lessons, 3 play dates, and a birthday party. And I just felt like my head was going to explode. And so now that's all had to stop. And so I can wake up in the mornings on Saturdays a little bit later. I can do my quiet time, my devotional time. I can sit and look out the window for a little bit. And I think we had just stopped doing that. We had stopped giving ourselves time to be quiet. And so that is, I think, definite silver lining in this pandemic. And I'm hoping to hold on to it when we navigate ourselves out of it. But to answer the question, I think just be kind to yourself and just understand that it's okay, and do not, I'm not on social media, but if you are, remember, people post what they want people to see, not necessarily what's happening. So do not hold yourself to standards that just aren't realistic.
I actually do have something more positive to say than my, oh my God, I'm really trying, is I also am not on social media. And so I think I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
I have a ton of good friends who do the same job I do, or the one before it. And I rely so much on my friends. I think my sister's on this call too. My sister is a doctor and we have kids the same age. And so I rely on her, not only to help out with like navigating our children to their activities, but it's so nice to have a friend who's able to give you the grace to say, you know what, you're doing the best you can, and it's all going to be all right, and whatever the horrible thing you think you did just wasn't that bad, and these kids are going to be fine. And so it is nice, and I've relied frankly on my Marlboro friends for all of these years to check in with them and to have them remind me that we're all just doing the best we can.
And can I also say on that point, I promise you that something that you think is the end of the world is not. And we hold ourselves to ridiculously high standards, ladies. I mean, they're high, and that's why we're good at what we do in this world. But this too shall pass. And I have had to remind myself of that every single day. This too shall pass. I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to go to sleep tonight, and I'm going to wake up, and God willing, the sun will rise, and we will make it through another day. So this too shall pass, and it'll be all right.
Thank you so much. I needed to hear all of that. So what has been the most rewarding aspect of your careers? Any memorable cases or moments? And we'll start with you, Kimberly.
Yes, I really have been very fortunate to have been able to see people at the beginning, middle, of end of journeys. One thing that I think is very consistent in my particular job, my current job and my most immediate past job, is I saw people often at their lowest, in their lowest moments in their lives. A person who has just been arrested and who has been arraigned, is in custody, doesn't know when they're getting out for whatever. It could be, when I do prelims arraignments for murder, or it could be, something like a domestic violence situation. And when you see a person in the depths of despair, for them, what quite possibly is the lowest moment of their life, quite possibly the worst day of their life, there's a humility in that. And a vulnerability in that, even though they're incarcerated and they're having to make sure that they aren't seen as weak because they're in a space where that can definitely be a disadvantage, put them at a disadvantage. But what has been so rewarding is seeing people come through it. And I think a lot of people think, well, you're the judge, you sentence, and then you're done. You preside over the trial, and then that's it. And as I indicated earlier, I do with post-conviction matters and people who are on diversion and people who are on probation. So I see people over time. And the highest points of this job, bar none, have been when I have a defendant who has maintained their sobriety for a year, a defendant who maybe had a child abuse case and now they're reunited with their children, a defendant who has mental illness and was hallucinating and not on medications and threatening to kill people, who now has gone to school, been in therapy, has a job. And when they come back and they tell you thank you, because in the moment that you first saw them, they were at their lowest and they weren't happy to see you. And even in maybe the sentencing, they weren't happy about the sentence. They didn't want to go to counseling. They didn't want to stop taking drugs. They didn't want whatever it was that was ordered. But to see them at the end of that journey and for them to say, Judge, thank you, has been so tremendously rewarding and makes all of the different challenging parts of this job worth it for sure.
As Judge Guillemet said, I feel so lucky to have this job because there are just these moments of great reward. So I'm actually going to answer your question a little differently, Kara, and talk about what I've found the most memorable about the day-to-day life of being a lawyer. As a young lawyer at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had a group of friends and we were the biggest nerds. We spent every weekend in the office. We didn't have, I don't think any of us had kids then, so we spent literally every Saturday and Sunday. And when you're a younger lawyer, you would have an opportunity to give a practice opening statement, and closing argument. And if you were going to argue before the Ninth Circuit, you could be mooted by a panel. But because we had this really nerdy group of friends, we would organize our own second mock opening statement and our own second moot court, which meant that your friends would agree to read all of your pleadings so that they could prepare questions for you and that they would know enough about the facts of your case that they could deliver good criticism. And I am just so touched that I had a group of friends who were willing to give up their whole weekend. I mean, granted, it was all before we had any kids, so we had nothing but time, that I had this extraordinary group of friends, a number of whom actually are on the bench with me or on the Superior Court and on the Court of Appeal with me now, that I could rely on people who were just so generous in order to make my work product so good. And that has been the best part of my legal career, is the opportunity to work with really smart people who are also hardworking and generous in their spirit. So my fondest memories are weekends ordering pizza and getting a bunch of nerdy people to agree to moot you because you just really want the practice.
And so this next one is a fun one. If you weren't serving as esteemed judges, what would you be doing? So any dream jobs, no matter how obscure, that you can share with us. And we can start with you, Dorothy.
So professionally, as far as like where I'm in my life, as I told you all at the beginning, I have very little imagination. I'm doing my job, my dream job. I love it. If I could do something different, like later on, I would want to be a park ranger and be the person who gives the twilight talk. You know, when you go to a campsite at national parks and have the amphitheater, and there's the park ranger who has a really powerful flashlight and like can point out stars and the animals. That's what I would want to do.
I love that.
That is awesome. I love it. I would be a teacher or a writer, or, and this is, I mean, I'm sharing a very deep dream, and I'm sharing it with all of you because you're my Marlboro sister, and I really do, I hope one day to start a center for reconciliation for families who are broken, because in my line of work, I think so much of what we see before us stems from brokenness, and it stems from hurt and trauma. And so in my heart of hearts, one day I would love to be able to start a center that addresses that and holistically helps folks reconcile and get well. So we'll see, maybe one day.
It will happen. I'm confident. Nobody asked me, but if I wasn't a lawyer, I'd be a pop star, you guys. That's why I'm a lawyer. Anyways, so we're right up against time. This is actually perfect because we're at our last question. So what's next? Future goals? I know, Kimberly, you just hit on a future goal. Are there any others? Yeah, what can we expect from you next?
Well, I have been on the bench almost 3 years, so I'm still a rather novice at this particular job. So I want to continue in this work. I'm very fortunate to be one of the co-chairs of the first ever Los Angeles Superior Court Mentor Committee. So I want to put a plug in for any of our phenomenal alumni who are interested in pursuing the bench. We have a mentorship program, and we just launched it yesterday. And it was launched because despite us being in one of the most diverse jurisdictions in the country, our bench does not reflect that diversity. And so we want more women, we want more people of color on our bench, and we are doing everything we can to ensure that we don't self-select ourselves out of even applying. Because as women, often we're very hard on ourselves. We talked about this earlier. We hold ourselves to these ridiculously high standards. And it's great to have high standards, but oftentimes we'll see a man and a woman applying for the same job, and the woman's attributes are up here, the man's attributes are here, and she won't apply, and he will. So women, please apply to the bench if you're at all interested. You can go to the LA Superior Court website. There is a link to click on to apply to be in the Judicial Mentorship Program. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Outreach Committee. And so I will welcome you with open arms. We really want to see you there. And so to answer the question, I'm going to keep doing my job. I think that's what's next for me. And I hope to see many of you soon on the bench as colleagues.
I have been at this job for a little over 2 years. And as I said before that, I was on the Superior Court. So I'm going to keep doing this job and hope to maybe get even more efficient at it. But I so echo what Judge Guillemet said. I would love to see more people apply, and I would love to stop this endless cycle of, as Judge Guillemet said, women feel like they need to be perfect in order to apply for a position that they exceeded the qualifications for long ago. So I would like to see many more applicants and many more people. And certainly I'd love seeing some Marlboro folks, even more on the bench.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your knowledge with all of us. This was incredible. Megan, I think that we're right up against time. I don't know if there are any audience questions we can get to, or if there are any, but I will hand it back to you, Megan.
Thank you. And thank you so much to all three of you. I must admit that throughout some of your stories and pieces of advice, I found myself getting quite emotional. And I think and hope that everyone here tonight has been very inspired by you, and regardless really of their professional pursuits. So just thank you so much for your time. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I think we won't have time for audience Q&A, but again, just thank you so much. And I couldn't let everyone leave without plugging our next event, which would be our conversation with Dr. Erica Bath, who's the class of 1989, and Lily Rowe, class of 2007. They'll be joining us to discuss racism as a public health issue, which I think particularly during this pandemic is really just during this time is so relevant and important to talk about. So that will be on December 1st at 6 p.m. Pacific. I hope we'll see you there, and please tell your fellow alumni and classmates to join us too. I cannot say thank you enough. I'm so grateful to the three of you for joining us, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you for having me. It was phenomenal. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Good seeing you all. Thank you. Good night.
Good
Have
night.
a good evening.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night. Good night. Bye.